Today's notes video focuses on Chapter 10, Lesson 9, and that is about summarizing categorical data. Okay, so make sure you're on page 854. All right. Categorical data is data that can be divided into categories based on attributes of the data. So instead of just a list of numbers, we're getting more specific information about the kinds of things that we're talking about. So the number of students per instrument, uh, if the kids playing the bass were 3, cello 4, clarinet 3, drums 16, flute 6, violin 8. And so we take that information and we can actually either draw some conclusions based on just the data in the chart, or we can actually make it into a graph. In this particular situation, they have made the graph into a bar graph, okay, which makes it very easy for us to summarize the data a little bit. Now, can you tell which instrument was the most popular? Go ahead and answer that for me, please. Very good. That is the drums. And so in this case, since there were 16 tally marks, 16 kids that preferred the drums or that played the drums, then that is going to be considered the mode. Okay, so we can visualize that this is the number that occurs most frequently is the drums. So this is 16. Okay, anytime you've got a bar graph, it's always a good idea to actually label the bars. So this is halfway between 2 and 4. So what number is this going to be? Very good. That's going to be 3. And then we have 4 people for the cello, 3 people for the clarinet, 6 people for the flute, 8 people for the violin. So the next most popular is the violin. So if we were to make a statement comparing the violin to the drums, we could say that there are half as many people playing the violin, or we can also say that twice as many people play the drums. So we can actually make statements about that as well to interpret that data. Okay, let's look at this data chart, and without drawing a bar graph, let's go ahead and answer a question about this. It says the table shows flavors of gum that are most popular. Summarize the data using the mode. So what is the most frequently described favorite flavor? Go ahead and answer that for me, please. Very good. The most frequent flavor that people loved was peppermint. So the mode is going to be peppermint. Most people enjoyed peppermint, but we can also look and say, but there were 8 people that like cinnamon. So that is a very close second, and the fact that 7 people like spearmint means that it's really a close race. So it's not like the drums that were way more popular than the violin. It's pretty close in the middle, but the mode is peppermint. So most of the people said that they preferred peppermint more than cinnamon and spearmint. Okay, probably the most important skill for us to know about summarizing categorical data is the idea of relative frequency. And we just kind of talked about that a little bit when we were discussing, okay, yeah, a lot of people like peppermint, but people also really liked cinnamon and also spearmint. So we want to be able to be more specific about how close some of these numbers are. So relative frequency is how we're going to do that. It's a ratio of the number of times a category is represented compared to the total number of pieces of data. Okay, which brings us back to our friend, the percent. And we've discovered the percent of something by the ratio, which is the fraction, the part compared to the total. Okay, so this table shows the students, number of students who have visited various states. Okay, 11 students have visited California, 15 Florida, 3 Georgia, 7 Maine, 3 North Carolina. Okay, so what's the relative frequency when we compare them to everything else? So the first thing we have to understand is how many different students are we talking about here? How many surveyed were surveyed? So we're going to find that by adding the number of students. So 12 plus 15 is what number? 27, very good. Plus 3 is 30. And then if you have 7 plus 3 is 10, 10 plus 30 is 40. So we're talking about a total of 40 students. Okay, so to discover the relative frequency, 12 of the 40 students had visited California, and it shows right here how to make that into a decimal. We are going to divide the number 12 by the number 40, and we are going to have to actually annex a 0 here, so make that 120. And then we have, well, 40 can't go into the 12, so 40 can go into 120 3 times because 40 times 3 is 120. So that's where we get this 0.3. And remember, to make that a percent, we multiply by what number? Very good. We multiply by the number 100. And in order to multiply by the number 100, we actually move the decimal 2 places over. And remember, there are 2 zeros in 100. And you get that 30%, this 30% right here. So in order to calculate the rest of these relative frequency numbers, we're going to take the number 15 and we're going to divide that by 40. And then we're going to take the number 3 and divide that by 40. And then we're going to take the number 7 and we're going to divide that by 40. And luckily, this last one is also a 3, and we would have already calculated that as well. So let's go ahead and get started with this. So I want you to take the number 15, and I want you to divide that by 40. Go ahead and solve that for me, please. Okay, forgive me, I got a little too close to the edge here, but 40 times 3 is 120, and when we subtract that, we got 30. We annex a 0, bring it down, and then you have 300. 7 times 4 is 28, so that's going to be 280. Then we have 20. We annex a 0, bring it down. 5 times 4 is 20, so 5 times 40 is 200. So basically, if I were to multiply this times 100, the relative frequency of Florida is going to be 37 and 5/10%. Okay. Now, if I do the same thing with 3 divided by 40 and 7 divided by 40, then we're going to multiply that decimal by 100 to get the percent. So go ahead and tell me what is the relative percent of 3/40. Okay, 40 can't go into 3, and so we're going to put the decimal. Then that's 30. That's going to be a 0. 300. 7 times 40 is 280. Subtract that, get 20. Bring down a 0. 5 times 40 is 200. Supposed to be a 200. And so we get 0.075. Now, if we multiply that by 100, we just move the decimal over twice, and we get 7 5/10%. And that's also the same for North Carolina. So finally, let's figure out the relative frequency of 7/40. So let's divide the number 7 by 40. Go ahead and answer that for me, please. All right, so again, we're going to have to annex a 0 here, and 1 times 40 is 40. Subtract that, we get 30. Bring down a 0. 7 times 40 is 280. We get 20. Bring down a 0. So 175 thousandths. And if we multiply that by 100 to change the decimal into percent, we end up getting 17 5/10%. So that's how you find the relative frequency. You basically make the fraction and to divide it to get the decimal, multiply by 100. All right, let's go ahead and we got actually 2 more things to talk about. Okay, so I've turned the answer key on so you can see kind of a cleaner, more nicely typed version of what we just talked about, the relative frequency. 7 out of 40 is 17 5%. 3 out of 40 is 7 5/10%. This next example, we're talking about students that can speak different languages. we have a total of, let's see, um, 2 plus 15 is 17. 17 plus 6 is 23. So if you have 23 plus 27, if you have 50 students, 4% of them, 2 out of 50, could speak Arabic. 15 out of the 50 could speak French. So that's 30%. 12% spoke German. 27%. I mean, sorry, 27. So 54% could speak Spanish. Okay, so you can see kind of make the fraction, you do the division, and then you multiply by 100. Now, once we have this data, you can do something called a percent bar graph. Okay, so basically you represent out of 100, you find the percentage, and then that's how long the various bars are. So this particular bar graph from 0 to 100%, you'll notice that over 20% of people use a laptop, a smaller amount use a tablet, and you've got a large percent will use their phone, a smaller percent will use MP3 players. So that's, you basically find the relative frequency and then you translate that into a bar graph. On the next page, you're going to see another example of a percent bar graph that actually looks more like a bar graph. You've got the Y value is from 0 to 100%. This is after we've already made the calculations for relative frequency. And you'll notice that there are 3 particular bars. We're comparing 6th grade to 7th grade to 8th grade. The red part are the number of male students, and the blue part are the number of female students. In 6th grade, 60% of the students are male, 40%, because 100 minus 60 is 40, 40% are female. In 7th grade, we have 65% are male, and so 35% are female. And then in 8th grade, we have 50% are male and 50% are female. So then we can make some conclusions about this. One conclusion is that there are more male students in 6th grade and 7th grade than there are female students in those grade levels. And that in 8th grade, it's exactly 1/2 female and 1/2 male. All right. Now, we're going to, in independent practice, be talking more about summarizing categorical data. You can see another example. This is another example of a percent bar graph here where you've got the key, and you can see just by the size of the amounts that more than 40% liked action movies, less people liked comedies, fewer people liked dramas, and a little bit more people like thrillers than liked dramas. So we can make some conclusions based on that as well. Okay, let's think about what's the most important thing about today's lesson that we learned. Please go back and review the notes, look at the book, come up with something to say that makes sense. Do not say I don't know, because then you won't get any credit for the video. So please make sure you answer this thoughtfully. Go ahead and answer that for me. What is the most important thing about today's lesson? Thank you for being thoughtful. Please come to class so we can do more examples together. You can ask questions. Come to Math Help if you really are struggling with this data analysis. Thank you.